So thanks, Gabriel, for the introduction, so we can kind of skip that to a degree. What I did want to do, in keeping the intros short, is could you each just summarize in one sentence what you think your speciality is in the Web3 space? I'll start with Chris.
Building great products that have superior user experience.
Xavier?
I think we're probably one of the most crypto-native staking providers, I would say. So we have a big focus on governance and MEV and some cutting-edge topics. So yeah, big focus on staking infrastructure and then everything around that as well.
And Tom?
Nice. I would say externalizing what we've built at Coinbase to build Coinbase for other folks to go build what they're looking to do.
Cool, perfect. Okay, so we're all obviously here because we're passionate about Web3 infrastructure, especially inter-chain connectivity. Sergey yesterday brought up a really great point that the speed of the space, how it's evolving, all the new projects, they all come with their own quirks, their own nuances that need to be adopted. And that's something that needs focus, and we need to figure that out. But what I wanted to ask you guys, and touch on that if you feel you need to, but what do you think is something that is not given as much attention in the space, that is a problem that we need to solve? I'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah, I think, particularly for staking, in my mind, governance comes to play. I think the way that I think about governance is almost like an election, right? Where you have folks that participate at the presidential level where there's a major proposition up on a chain and you get a ton of folks in and they're voting on it. But then those token holders aren't participating in the local election. What I mean is more like lower scale but equally important governance proposals on chain, and we're not seeing super high engagement rates in governance. I think both Coinbase and on the staking side, as well as like custodians and whether they're hardware wallets, I think we all can do a better job of exposing governance to users and helping them make more insightful decisions about the chains.
And how do you think that relates directly to like the multi-chain world that we live in and the interconnectivity part of it?
Yeah, I think like each chain is responsible for its own sovereignty, right? So they need to decide kind of what the users want and how they establish the multi-chain sort of mesh that's there. And governance is a key way of deciding like how are you going to interact and how are these folks ultimately going to come to consensus.
So you kind of feel that it's on the chains themselves to sort of deal with that?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, like I think it's also to get buy-in from the token holders and the chains to really like follow the vision that was outlaid and use governance as a tool to really define that.
Brilliant. Xavier, what do you think?
Yeah, I think governance is a great point. I think maybe another topic that isn't discussed so much sometimes is the fungibility of all the bridged assets across chains. And now you have stable swap, et cetera, that you can use on all these chains. But it's still something to bear in mind, I guess, that especially through IBC, not even just through XLR, the different types of tokens coming through different channels and how they don't really necessarily interoperate with each other every single time. So I still think we could, come up with a better solution for this type of fungibility of cross-chain assets.
Fantastic. Chris?
Sure. In addition to those things, I would just add some of the things I've been thinking about are around making sure that once we have these bridging technologies in place, that they're as decentralized as possible, right? We want to make sure that they're sensor resistant, that they have as much resilience as possible, because ultimately when we start building abstractions on top of these different chains, we want to make sure that they're 100% reliable and that they can't be taken down because assets get orphaned and all sorts of bad things happen.
You talk about decentralization there, and it was something that Tom and I were talking about backstage. What do you think is the sort of the best route in an interchain world to get to that decentralization? Do you think you need to start with an element of centralization and grow from there, or do you think decentralization is just key?
I mean, it's going to be an evolution thing, right? At the end of the day, I think maybe light clients approaches where we can look at making sure that the Oracle infrastructure that runs some of these things is as resilient as possible and censorship resistant. I think it's going to be little steps along the road to get us there.
So I was having a beer with some of the guys at Denver last night, and we were talking about this panel. And one of the things that they're builders, and they had no real idea as to how staking works in like an interchain environment. So Tom, do you want to give us just a little overview of how that sort of process works and where you think the optimizations need to come in future to make it better as well?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, right, we have at Coinbase Cloud, we have a host of customers that are looking to integrate staking across multiple chains. They come to cloud because they want to save time or they don't have the expertise within each of the individual chains. The way that I think about it, right, is like each network that's out there is almost like a micro nation state, right? Each has their own economy and their own sort of rules. And our job as a staking provider, in sort of a corny way, is to be like a travel agent for them. In the same way, if you go to sub-Saharan Africa or Machu Picchu, like you want to know what to expect. So what we try to do with our customers is to say, hey, here are the staking mechanics, what the sort of total number of validators are, what's the minimum amount of stake that's there, what is your obligation in terms of governance, what does slashing look like, and help them make a decision. From that point, the integration is seamless. So whether you're integrating on one chain to stake or multiple, our dream vision for cloud really is this idea of you're an end user, you're a product providing staking to your customers. How do you have a seamless experience, a staking experience, whether you're going to Cosmos or Axelar or any other chain that might be out there in a consistent way? That's the way that we think about it, handle it with the customers.
Okay, so there may be some people in the audience that are thinking around, like, do you need staking as a service? And you talk about decentralization. I think that comes alongside kind of like non-custodial solutions as well. So, like, Chris, I'd love to sort of pass it on to you as to what would you say to people that think that sort of staking as a service isn't something that's required? And because, I mean, ultimately, there is a risk that success in that industry leads to more centralization, someone could argue.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I think people who do staking as a service take it very seriously. Like running a staking validator is not like running a web server, right? It really requires 24/7. It requires patches. It requires keeping the thing up and running, having specialized hardware, and doing things that like in an ideal world, everyone would sort of self-stake. But I think our thesis is that the networks themselves may not be as resilient as they are if you don't have people that are sort of professionals at running those things. And so there's definitely a desire to have both, but our belief is that it's actually kind of a hard job to do, and that you have to have a lot of dedication. And sure, you could do it as a self-staker, but that staking as a service providers are going to, in some cases, have expert knowledge about the intricacies of individual protocols that are just hard to get overnight.
What are your thoughts, Xavier?
Yeah, I think I agree. Ideally, the whole world self-stakes, but I think realistically that's probably not going to happen. So I can give an example here where we have a public partnership with Zero Knowledge Validator, which is quite a big validator in the Cosmos ecosystem. And we run the infrastructure for them here, but they contribute to the ecosystem in many other ways, through governance. They're quite influential in the ecosystem itself. So I think there will always probably be a role where maybe someone doesn't have the skills to run the nodes themselves, but they have a lot of other skills, and maybe they have a brand, and this might make sense for them to earn delegations by partnering up with someone like Chorus One here, for example, to receive external delegations. I think I wouldn't recommend necessarily this type of option unless you had this type of brand, or you were maybe a major institution with significant stake. And I would also sort of recommend being relatively transparent about it if you can, because I think this whole industry can be slightly opaque at times, and there's definitely a long way to go in making it more transparent. But I think it's trying to find a good middle ground between these entities that don't have the knowledge to run the infrastructure but still want their brand on the network, and then contributing back to the network in different ways other than running the infrastructure.
You touched on transparency there. What do you reckon are some kind of methods that can be used by staking providers to improve that transparency?
I think a lot of it is communication. I think there's no standards right now for node operators to be doing this. It's very hard to know what nodes are being run by who. There's some tooling being created right now. I know Rockaway has some in the Cosmos. But it's very, like I mentioned, opaque. And I think this will just take time. Probably some of our entities, the bigger entities coming together as well, trying to work through some sort of process for what this looks like as well, to make sure that these networks stay as decentralized as possible.
What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think these other guys brought up a good point here, and one thing I want to call out is, right, folks come to a staking provider not because they can't do it on their own, but their time is better spent doing something else. And I think overwhelmingly what we find is most of our clients, or all of our clients, can run validators, right? But what they're thinking is, hey, I'm better at building a wallet or a DEX or whatever it may be. So I think we hear a lot of centralized staking provider, single staking provider means centralization. And what we've worked at Cloud to do is really offer different optionality for running the validator in the first place. So whether that's regional support, you want to run it at a different geo, cloud support, right? And we're working to expand that. So even if two folks are staking or offering staking through Coinbase Cloud, they can have completely different deployments in the same way that Chorus One and Blockdaemon do it. So I wouldn't necessarily think of staking providers as a centralization risk, but more really the onus is on us as staking providers to offer more optionality to create a further decentralized deployment in the hopes that, again, my thesis is if folks are not working on staking, they can work on more important things and build better products. So if we can hold up our end and keeping it a little bit more decentralized, I think we all benefit.
I mean, would you align it to kind of mining pools in Bitcoin, where people think that a mining pool means that there's centralization in Bitcoin, but people can move pools whenever they want?
I think in concept, yes. I think the major difference for us is like we're non-custodial, right? And like in theory, yeah, like, you know, sort of the power of many outweighs the power of an individual. But that's the thought, right? We have folks that have super keen decentralization needs and they want their validators in specific areas. We have other folks that are looking more so for optimization and can kind of geek out on that as much as we want.
So, Chris, one of the things I wanted to go into next was what future innovations do you think are needed and are you excited about in this space?
Yeah, future innovations. I mean, I think for sure, you know, executing smart contracts cross-chain, you know, in a very seamless way with, you know, proven and you know, frameworks that make it easy for just average people to do that. You know, obviously, you know, the reliability side of things I alluded to earlier in terms of making sure that, you know, once you're, you know, sort of doing cross-chain, you know, queries, that you can rely on those kinds of things. You know, when you look maybe further down the road and you start to say, okay, we have these foundations that create reliable mechanisms for cross-chain communication that are unstoppable. You know, what can we do as far as making sure that, you know, things that, you know, come from more of a transactional world, like I don't know, optimistic blocking and these sorts of things, allow application developers to build higher and higher level applications on these foundations that are just more and more reliable over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think given that this whole industry really is still in beta, this is like we're still testing things live. It's very the whole we're still early element. Do you think one of the areas like standardization across chains, is that something that we can actually even get to? And if so, like how would we get there? How do we bring chains together to make some of those decisions?
I mean, I think there's a Darwinistic answer to that, which is like, you know, the best things are going to rise to the top, and you know, you see a lot of different ecosystems proliferating in many different places. You know, the Cosmos SDK is pretty, you know, is being used a lot. You know, and so, you know, do you need to, you know, enforce standardization at the chain level? Maybe not, because that's, you know, of course, you know, these app chains are going to have opportunities for doing things that are better than other places, and so it does come down in some cases to making sure that the bridging technologies are as reliable and unstoppable as possible. So just more so than getting into the, I think the lower level details of the chains, in my opinion.
So letting the space naturally evolve at its own pace, and
yeah.
Xavier?
Yeah, and I mean, just in terms of, I guess, where it could be going in the future, I think bridging is a really early technology, and I think we're seeing now a lot of zero-knowledge solutions coming out. So, you know, Polymer presented sort of yesterday, I think, one application there. Catalyst, I believe. You've got Wormhole as well, working on their own zero-knowledge technology. I think this is probably the future. Succinct is another one, which is like sort of zero-knowledge proofs of consensus of other chains. I think it's just much more scalable. I don't know if Axelar has future plans in their roadmap to introduce this, but I think many blockchains will have some sort of zero-knowledge strategy in the future. So yeah, right now super early. I think there's probably 2 or 3 major, let's say, interoperability networks that fortunately we run infrastructure on all of them, so we have good eyes and vision into their strategy and what they're doing. So yeah, I would say that's probably the most exciting thing to come in the bridging space. So
I remember Sergey yesterday did talk about ZK proofs and AI in their new Kubernetes for Web3 product alongside the virtual machine. So it's definitely something to look into it and see. I mean, what are your thoughts, Tom, in terms of where do we need to see the innovations? I mean, I also agree, bridges. Like, for me, that's one of the big key areas.
Yeah, I think of innovation in kind of 2 ways, right? There's the tech stack around staking and all like the intricacies that go into staking, but I think everybody in this room can buy at a centralized exchange and get a self-custodial wallet and link to DeFi and stake. In my opinion, that market is drying up in terms of like what is the addressable market for net new stakers. So the innovation that I would look to see is really from how do we bring in more folks? Like how do we make the journey of staking a little bit easier? And what I find to be friction is still that seed phrase process, right? Spinning up a self-custodial wallet, managing that. Like, I tried to get my dad to stake. I don't know if anybody in here has ever tried to get their parents to do staking. It's like a 15 phone call sort of a situation. So like in my mind, MPC technology is going to be huge. Like removing key seed phrases and helping folks create self-custodial wallets that are a little bit easier. And then from there, you mentioned like uniformity across chains. I think when we look at staking rewards across different protocols, some offer crazy rewards, some have really high slashing implications. I'd love to see that flatten out over time, where we have folks have at least like a baseline understanding of what their risks and what the reward looks like, where they don't have to be an expert in each chain. I think those innovations, granted somewhat longer term, will help bring in more folks to staking and to Interchain, obviously.
Last year, I was listening to a talk by Sonny on Cosmos talking about mesh networks in IBC and how you can financially incentivize chains to help the security of others. Is that something that you think is a good solution? And if so, is it something you'd like to see come to, say, like EVM chains and stuff? Over to Xavier on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I think right now, mesh security could be probably the most promising sort of idea that the whole Cosmos ecosystem has. Yeah. Ideally, as Cosmos grows stronger and individual chains, the whole ecosystem grows stronger together, which right now isn't the case, and each community and blockchain is quite siloed. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty exciting. They built a prototype, I believe, in Meegan last year, and I think they're getting closer. At some stage this year, this will go live. You could see like Osmosis, Axelar, chains that have a lot of volume and liquidity across each other, like sort of starting to secure each other. In fact, like I would argue that perhaps EigenLayer was somewhat inspired by some of this. I think in terms of EVM, will it come to EVM? I think it is coming to EVM with this. If you think about restaking, that's somewhat similar to mesh security because you're restaking a liquid staking token. And then as well as like these extra validator services, which I think is really cool as well, which EigenLayer is also offering, which I think is coming to Cosmos as well with ABCI++. So I think there are similar ideas in both Cosmos and Ethereum right now, which is like sort of intersecting. And as an outcome of that, I think validators will be able to specialize more, create higher rewards for their delegators. So yeah, I think there's a lot of cool ideas coming out that will be implemented in both ecosystems this year, which I'm pretty excited about.
Fantastic. Chris, I wanted to go over to you in terms of someone that's looking for an interchain, cross-chain infrastructure provider. What would you recommend as being some ways that they can figure out how to get the best value, how to know that they're going with the right person? I thought it would be a great sort of question to ask you guys is basically like, if I was looking to choose you, what would you kind of recommend that I ask? Or maybe also not really want me to ask.
Yeah. I mean, I'll answer sort of selfishly, right? But like, you want to make sure that, the partner that you choose is a company that's going to be around. That they've got good funding, that they are ISO certified, that they have financially audited accounts, that they have good governance, that they have a board of directors, so that shady things don't happen. And I think the other thing is that in some cases time in market is better than time to market, right? And a lot of these protocols require, in some cases, some specialized knowledge, right? They change quickly, and so when you pick a partner, you want to make sure that they have a large number of validators out there, that they're distributed, between cloud and metal, and that you're going to, basically have an SRE team that's, going to make sure that when things don't work, that that they're aware of it first, and that as a customer, you're not having to tell your provider that something isn't working.
Tom?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it stems from like, what is it or why are you offering staking, right? Are you an individual with a substantial amount of tokens and you're looking to offload the purpose of running a validator? And that question set is slightly different than if you're a wallet and you're looking to provide a staking solution to everybody in your application. I think everything Chris said is spot on from a due diligence standpoint. The one thing I would add is, right, like what is the universe of overlap between what your current roadmap as a wallet looks like and support and what does your future look like? Having to use multiple staking providers to hodgepodge together like your matrix of supported chains is just like increasingly more difficult. The other thing I would add is like beyond just integrating a validator and kind of like having your user click and delegate their stake, like how do you make it easier for the folks that are going to be staking? Is there a staking API that you can integrate, right? Is there an opportunity for you to display rewards in a sort of clean way? Again, back to the joke about my dad, like he stakes, but he has no idea how many tokens he's earned, and I have trouble figuring that out for him. So like beyond just validators, when you're assessing providers, do they have value additive stuff like rewards and all that other stuff that I mentioned to make it easier for your end users?
Fantastic. Xavier?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Coinbase and Blockdaemon are both, world-class node operators. So apart from the standard reporting and, tracking the rewards and reliable infrastructure and redundancy, etc., I think a lot of our partners are very crypto native, like I mentioned at the start. So we do a lot of work with like VCs because they want to know where the space is going. So we sort of secure a lot of these new networks that, we have our own sort of thesis and vision, and we're quite big in the Cosmos specifically. We're a team of 50 compared to some of the bigger node operators, like completely employee owned and operated, which is also quite unique, and also based in Switzerland. So we're quite a niche node operator in the space, just in terms of seeing where, I guess, the whole entire ecosystem is going. And so we tend to partner up with institutions that are also interested in trying new things. For example, there's a lot of institutions coming now into the Cosmos. So potentially they might tap our knowledge into the ecosystem, which will sort of consult them almost. So yeah, our infrastructure is definitely one thing. And now we've got like a dashboard where any one of our partners can sort of, the dream is sort of a one-click staking API, which I know Coinbase and Blockdaemon also have, probably already. So yeah, like I think we're a year or two behind some of these entities, but now we're getting there. 2023 is going to be a big year for us, and we like partnering with people that like being at the cutting edge of the space.
So what sort of things are you trying to focus on in kind of the internal meetings in terms of how to differentiate yourself in the space?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's probably the classic age-old question in node operating is like, how do you differentiate? It's really hard. I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but I can give one area that Chorus One looks at to try and differentiate. So MEV has been like a really big topic for us in the last 12 months. We released a paper a week or two ago on MEV and Solana called Breaking Bots, if anyone wants to check it out. It's about understanding MEV in all ecosystems because it's different in Cosmos and Solana and Ethereum. And I mentioned EigenLayer before. There are additional services that validators might start offering, like maybe it's an Oracle in some Ethereum application or something like that. Or is there a way for a validator to really gain intelligence in MEV, of course, in a way that's still in the ethos of the ecosystem, but potentially then distribute that extra yield to delegators? And that's a way, potentially, if you see Chorus One as earning delegators extra yield in a nice, ethical way, then would you stake more with Chorus? Like maybe the argument there is yes, but this is very, very early. Yeah, we have an MEV team that's been working on this for a year now. There's 3 or 4 people there, now distributed across Cosmos, Ethereum, and Solana. So yeah, that's the way that we see a big differentiator in the future, for us at least.
And I think just optionality in general, and it's something that you said, Tom, and I think it's great to see you guys all agreeing on that concept that we need other options in the space. Otherwise, there's then the argument comes up around centralization, and there's the pros and cons, you debate it and such. Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts based on what Xavier was saying is, how do you feel about sort of newer players in the space? Do you see it as competition? Do you see people nipping at your heels? Are you excited for more people in the space?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've never shied away from competition. I think it's great. It causes us all to be better and to look at what we're doing and see how to improve and innovate. So, lack of competition would get kind of boring. And we look at our competitors, and we love it. Like I don't think that's a problem at all. I think overall for blockchain and for decentralization, it's a good thing. And I think where we think we add value is in places like a single staking intent API that cuts across different blockchains, and the multi-party computation side of things. We think that we're ultimately going to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of folks, and so we're not too worried about what our competitors are doing.
Nice. Tom?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the way that I think about it, right, is the worst case scenario for Coinbase Cloud is running too much of a network, right, where we have incredibly high network penetration and are sort of like an arbiter of the future of the network in the event that there's an outage, right?
That's a really strange position. There's not many industries where that's the case.
Yeah. It's an awkward situation in some cases, but because of that fact, it lends itself very well to healthy competition. And to your question earlier around use case, I think like when new staking providers pop up, I don't view it as like the addressable market for Coinbase Cloud shrinks, but rather like the use case specific form of staking has gotten a little bit smarter. And our sort of way of approaching competition is sure, like a nimble startup looking to add staking in a wallet might make sense for XYZ provider, and like there could be a graduation path that works. Also, like to Chris's point, people are making really cool stuff, and like we get inspiration from what our customers want, what our competitors are building, and we're all kind of at the front of what staking might be in the future. So any new entrant that comes in and makes something cool gets us excited.
So what about, and this is just an open question for anyone who wants to pick it up, Web 2 infrastructure companies moving into Web 3, your Googles, your Cloudflares and the such, we're at Interop, we're talking about Interchain. Do you think those companies have what it takes to deal with the interchain complexities of like staking infrastructure? Anyone?
I mean,
go for it?
I'll speak briefly. I think one of the advantages that cloud brings is the reputation in history. Right? We existed as Bison Trails before Coinbase Cloud, and now we're Coinbase Cloud, so we have a track record and really like the ability to run multiple blockchains, but it isn't just running the validators. We have a team of protocol ops teams that research and liaise with the protocols themselves. Short answer, yes, I do think they can do it. They're behemoths, like they absolutely can build it. The question is, are they going to invest not just in the machines to run the validators, but the surrounding support to run it in a healthy way? And I'm curious to see how that shakes out.
Chris?
I wouldn't add much there other than, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of resources that are involved there, and they set their minds to something, and I don't have any doubt in the engineering prowess. I think that there's a difference in terms of the will too, right? A lot of times folks are looking for people who already have expertise in this area.
But that's one of the things. Like, do you think you can just hire in people, or is it an internal culture within the business that you need to be an Interchain Web3 native company to be able to offer this properly?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some cultural biases as far as folks wanting to increase financial inclusion and be part of a decentralized movement that would make it more difficult. But money goes a long way, so I wouldn't preclude that from happening. But so far that hasn't been a challenge we've run into. We have got people that work for us that know the stuff inside and out, and we're happy to collaborate with the Web 2 companies and helping them bring them along on this journey too. Because I think collectively we feel like it's the direction that's good for us all to head.
Fantastic. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to direct this one to Xavier as well. What's personally your favorite experience in your kind of journey into a more interconnected Web3 sort of crypto space?
Does it have to be interoperability related or staking related, or?
I mean, if you've just got an anecdote that's Web3 related, that's fine. But I was thinking kind of the interchain part.
Okay. I mean, interchain right now, interoperability, I think it's really important for financial assets. I think where it's going to get interesting soon will be interoperability across communication peer-to-peer networks, which is a bit different. And how can these communication peer-to-peer networks then interoperate with the interoperability networks of value transfer? So how can you have data transfer, which Axelar and some of these networks are trying a bit to have just generalized cross-chain message passing. But I guess, I think in the future, this type of experience, right now, there are some out there, without naming names here, but I'm really optimistic on this. I have to admit right now I don't use crypto as much as what I think I could because the applications aren't interesting enough for me to use. And this can change, and it should change, and I think it will change, but I think this next cycle will be the very start of what this looks like between the different layers.
But I think it's actually interesting you say that as well, because it's not on you to create those use cases. You're building the part that allows those use cases to happen. And that's the thing that I'm actually, it's not as sexy as some of the things in Web3, but Web3 infrastructure is the part that I want to see be done right, because we can figure out those other use cases and things. But I think the concept of blockchain and how it can work around the world is obvious. Tom, have you got any thoughts?
I mean, this is kind of cheesy, but the way that I think about really well infrastructure is kind of like good police work in a sense. When it works well, you don't notice it's there, right? That's kind of the way that I want this to be. Is again, I don't necessarily work interchain in applications. I'm a nerd. I just study crypto staking. But if we make staking really easy and make the ability to pass information across chain, that means that somebody can build a super cool game that I would play. Can they make Tetris decentralized across chain? I'm there. That's my take, but I haven't seen it yet. I'm hoping we can give the tools to these folks to do that.
Fantastic. We only got a few seconds left. So Chris, any thoughts for your favorite part of the interconnected world?
I think aggregated liquidity pools. I mean, that seems pretty exciting. I think liquidity in general is something that's just amazing, and it's something that when you have solid infrastructure, you can start to build cool things on top of.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been a keeper from CryptoSlate, and as I've heard several times here at Denver, have a good one.